Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana, as usual, took patients in the treatment room. She had fun with them, talking, doing dressings and injections. She handled it very skillfully. Patients were not in any pain at all. So many loved the medic for that and tried to come just on her shift. On the team, Adriana was always on the positive side like a lighter. Adriana never had depression or aggression, although her life was not that easy. Adriana's parents were never wealthy people. Her mother worked as a kindergarten nurse and her father as a school teacher. They were both paid a pittance, but though the family lived very hard financially, nevertheless, no one argued or abused alcohol. Quiet and intelligent people. Parents adored their daughter. Daddy called her a baby, loved to spin her around, lift her high and tickle her. Mom tried to save every penny, to save on food, but to buy her daughter new things so she would be no worse than anyone else. So she never lacked parental love. From an early age, Adriana loved medicine, treated her dolls, then the cats and dogs outside the doorway. So after school, of course, she went to medical school. The study was surprisingly easy for the girl. She had no special difficulties. After graduation from college, she got a job in a polyclinic in a procedure room. The girl was very fond of her business, worked to her heart's content, and was not lazy. Soon she met Michael. He worked as an ambulance driver. Guy was immediately attracted by this well-bodied, blue-eyed beauty and her peppermint like a bell, ringing laughter. There was no love lost between them, rather the passion and emotion of their youth. They quarreled and quarreled violently and made peace. The groom was terribly jealous for any reason. It was he who insisted on a speedy wedding, to be sure that his blue-eyed beauty would not get to anyone. However, the marriage did not last long, because Michael, not only that continues to harass his wife with jealousy, but he was no fool to cheat. As soon as this became known to Adriana, she immediately filed for divorce. The girl could not accept and forgive the betrayal. She was physically disgusted to be around such a duplicitous man. Michael was a womanizer by nature and genuinely wondered what was wrong with that. Well, the man was unfaithful. It doesn't happen. After the divorce, Adriana returned to her parents and continued to work as a nurse. But despite the meager salary and complete lack of personal life at age 28, Adriana still wasn't discouraged. She believed that everything is for the best. And today, having worked a shift, despite the terrible weather and snow and rain, she cheerfully tapped her heels on the sidewalk and even hummed to herself some merry tune. Adriana imagined how warm and nice and cozy it was at home. Her mother must have baked something for tea, and her father was already waiting to hear from her about how her day was going. Isn't that bliss? Suddenly, right in the square, she saw a man. He was sitting on a wet and icy bench, shrunk from the cold and wind, staring at one point. Even under his thin jacket, it was obvious how he was shaking from the cold. The woman paused and looked closely. He did not look like a tramp. His clothes were dirty but decent, and there was no disconcerting smell. He looked strangely brooding, unshaven. Maybe something had happened. Adriana, suddenly, for some reason, she felt so sorry for the poor man. And on an impulse, she went over and asked the man, "Good afternoon. Excuse me, can I help you? What happened to you? You look so sad. Here, take some money, some hot tea, and something to eat." The man looked up and said, "Thank you, but I'm not homeless, and I won't take any money. I just got caught up in a story. Now I don't know what to do. My name is Ethan. I'm from the neighboring town of Oltowski. I grew up in an orphanage. They say my mother died in childbirth. There were no other relatives. I don't know anything about my father. All my childhood, I believed that I, like many others, was about to be taken away to a loving family. They did take me away once, but 3 months later they brought me back. I was tired of playing in the family, and I got angry and started hating adults. How is it possible to surrender your son as an unnecessary thing and then live in peace. I still can't understand it. I don't know how I survived. I ran away 3 times with a friend. His name is Ethan, too. They found us and brought us back. I counted the days and minutes until I got out of that hell. Many of my friends had long since fallen down, drank or become drug addicts, had gone down the wrong path. I decided right away that I didn't want to do that. I tried, of course, like everyone else, to drink and smoke, but quickly realized that it was a road to nowhere. Then what was the point of living at all, if I wasted my life so fruitlessly? After graduation, I got a room in a communal apartment. It's a small town, there's no work at all, and I had to live on something. So I came here to earn money. I read an ad that a construction site required workers with accommodation. They promised me a good salary. We worked for a month and got paid, though not at all what was promised at first. But I was glad of that. It was yesterday, so I was running home to the train at the station. A trio cut me off. One of the bigger guys started it. "Hey, brother, give me a smoke." I don't smoke, but they didn't like the answer, and a fight ensued. After the orphanage, I'm good at it. First I hit them hard, and then I got knocked down. There were 3 of them, and I'm the only one. They took my money and documents and ran away. By the time I recovered, they were gone. I remembered their faces very well. Wake me up at night, and I'll describe them. But it's no use. Now I don't know what to do. Honestly, there's nothing to go home with. Then again, there's no way to look for a job here. Adriana listened without interrupting. Then she firmly held out her hand to the man. "You know what, Ethan? Why don't we go back to my place? My parents are good people. They will understand. We need to go to the police right now and tell them everything. And write a report about the loss of the passport. Let's go. I'll show you where the station is." Ethan took a good look at the woman. "Thank you for the offer, but it's uncomfortable. What will your parents think? I don't even know them. And I don't want to get involved with the police. I haven't liked them since I was a kid, and I don't think they'd go looking for burglars. I know how they work." But the woman was unstoppable. "I'm Adriana. Well, we've met. And how come the police won't be looking? It's their job, and they have to help. You have to at least try. But at least you'll get your papers back. You can't live without them anyway. And don't worry about your parents either. We'll come to some arrangement. Let's all go. It's too cold to stand here for so long." She confidently took him by the arm, and they went first to the police station, and then to Adriana's house. Were the parents greatly surprised to see a strange man and his daughter on the doorstep? The man didn't look very shaven, thin, and haggard, and the clothes were clearly not the first freshness. But since they were intelligent by nature, they didn't show it. Just culturally asked, "Good afternoon, my daughter. You're a little late today, aren't you?" My father and I were already worried. "You've never been back this late after your shift. We have guests." Adriana smiled and introduced her parents and her companion. "This is Ethan. He's a nice man from the next town over. Just got caught up in a bad story. We met in the park today. I have to help him. Some bandits stole his money and his papers. Ethan, meet my mommy, Betty, and Daddy Benjamin. Mom, Dad, do you mind if Ethan stays with us for a while until things get better?" "Well, you can't leave a man in trouble, can you? I'll put him in my room on the cot." Mom let out a semblance of a smile and quietly replied that you are not a child to ask our permission. "Whatever you decide, do it. Come in, Ethan, wash your hands and come to the table. It's true we live modestly, but we're happy to be rich. My father told me to talk to you, Ethan, after supper, in private. If you don't mind, just a few minutes." Betty and his daughter set the table, boiled jacket potatoes, cut herring into nice dishes, put out sauerkraut and pickles. So we ate dinner. After the meal, Benjamin and his guest went out on the balcony for a smoke. The master of the house began cautiously. "You see, Ethan, my daughter is very trusting, and because of this, she often suffers. I hope everything you told her is true. You don't mean any harm, do you? Ethan hastened to reassure Benjamin. Do not worry. I'm not a prisoner and not a criminal, not an Alphonse or a bum. Indeed, I was on my way to the train station yesterday for my earnings and got hit on the head. We even went to the police today. I wrote a statement. So what's the point of lying to me? I understand you bringing a strange man into the house. It's very risky, and you're as worried as a father about Adriana. I won't be for long. As soon as the paperwork is sorted out, or maybe we get lucky and find the bandits, I will immediately go to my home village. In the kitchen, my mother was also quietly talking to her daughter, Adriana. Well, can you be so trusting? After all, you do not know this young man. And what if he is not the one he pretends to be? We'll go to bed, and he'll cut us all off. The woman laughed. Mama, you say the same thing. What does he need all this for? What's there to take from us? We live as poor as church mice ourselves. I feel Ethan's not a bad man, but don't swear. I'll just help him out, that's all. He would leave at once. So Ethan went to live with Adriana. He turned out to be a surprisingly hard worker and not at all lazy. He got an unofficial job as a longshoreman at a market, not wanting to be a freeloader as a matter of principle. Often he was paid for unloading and loading. In addition to money, he also got fresh fruit and vegetables. He tried not to sit idle in his apartment too. All the time he was making something. Together with Benjamin, he made new shelves in the pantry to store all sorts of things. They repaired all the chairs that had become rickety and fixed the dilapidated balcony. She and Adriana bonded a lot. Did they socialize much? They watched interesting movies in the evenings and just went for walks when the weather permitted. Home, she now raced as fast as she could, knowing that Ethan was waiting for her there when she looked into his sad gray eyes. Or was he casually touching her arm? The woman felt like she was being electrocuted. Everything inside turned over. She had never felt such strong emotions for anyone. She felt that she liked Ethan too. He looked at her so searingly, complimented her, went to meet her from his shift, didn't let her carry heavy bags. So one night, when Adriana's parents went to an acquaintance's house for a birthday party and had to stay overnight, their first intimacy happened. Adriana came out of the shower ruddy smelling of scented soap. Ethan couldn't help himself, pulled the woman to him and kissed her softly on the neck. He was terribly worried that she would take it the wrong way or take offense, push him away. But the woman suddenly began to respond to his caresses, and they immediately whirled in a whirlpool of passion, forgetting about everything. All night long the man whispered words of love to her, called her a mistress of the sun, and she melted like chocolate in the sun. She had never felt so good with anyone. Her ex-husband was no match for her. With him, intimacy was like an obligation, a marital duty in the truest sense of the word. With Ethan, it was different. He made her rise to the pinnacle of bliss. He was so gentle and affectionate that she didn't want to open her arms right away. From that night on, Adriana and Ethan became a couple. The woman's parents gradually fell in love with him too. He turned out to be a hard worker, a decent guy who did not drink or take walks. So Ethan finally got his papers back, and he and Adriana took them to the marriage bureau to get married. Both were well aware by this point that they were literally made for each other. They were inseparable, did everything together, and never got tired of each other. Their girlfriends were even a little jealous. Adriana, you're a lucky girl. You walked and found a groom on the road. Wow. And he turned out to be a great guy. That's rare. Not like your ex, Michael, still chasing after every girl. Finally came the day of the wedding. We decided to have a party in a cafe. We invited our nearest and dearest. Adriana had a bad feeling from the morning, but she put it down to anxiety and panic just to excitement before the wedding. After all, she was getting married for the second time. She wanted everything to go perfectly. And this marriage was going to be long and happy. In the midst of it all, when the bride and groom were about to sign, suddenly there was a shout from the crowd of guests. Wait, Someone has brought an important letter, a courier. Here, take it. Ethan became angry. Who delivered what letter? What a timing you chose. Couldn't you have waited? He took the envelope in his hands and opened it mechanically, took out some photo papers, and began to read it and change his face. He even recoiled and went white as chalk and silently handed the papers to Adriana. He looked mad. She began to read. Her hands were shaking. She sobbed, threw off her veil, and ran out of the marriage hall in tears. The receptionist looked questioningly at all of this, then shouted into the microphone, "Gentlemen engaged in marriage. What's actually going on? What's this circus all about? Are you going to get married or not? By the way, I have 5 other couples in line besides you." Neither the guests nor Adriana's parents could figure out where the bride and groom had run off to. Why had the registration been interrupted? What could have been in that envelope that interrupted the wedding? Adriana's mom couldn't take it anymore and went to look too. How was the daughter? Where had she run off to? She thought it was from excitement. Maybe it was a reaction. But Adriana really wanted this wedding. So what happened? She found her daughter in the women's bathroom at the sink. All the makeup was dripping and streaking down her cheeks. Betty rushed to her daughter. "Adriana, my girl, what happened? Where's Ethan? We all don't understand." The bride suddenly looked angrily at her mother and threw the very letter right in her face, screaming, "Don't you understand? Really? Well, read it carefully. Yes, it says that Ethan and I are brother and sister, and a bunch of stamps from different authorities, you know. I had an affair with my blood brother. It's horrible and disgusting. And you knew everything, and you and your father were silent. Isn't that sacrilege? Tell me, why didn't you and your father tell me I wasn't your own? I am going away, and I never want to see you again. You are all traitors. You have disgraced me in the eyes of the world." Betty tried to shout after her, "I'm sorry, girl. I didn't know Ethan was your brother." "Adriana, wait, let's talk normally. Where are you going?" Adriana ran out into the street, waving her arms, and got into the car. Kathy's friend rattled the door and drove off to her house, pouring bitter tears. She felt so nasty and hurt and ashamed. It was as if she had been covered in mud from head to foot. Now she would never be able to wash it off. She wanted to go to ground and not see or hear anyone. Ethan tried to catch up with her too, as she ran toward her friend's car. But she shouted at him emotionally, "Don't follow me. Don't ever come near me. I hate you. I wish you hadn't come into my life." "Never." Betty quietly approached the receptionist and whispered something in her ear. Then she informed the guests that, due to an emergency, the wedding would have to be canceled. Benjamin kept trying to get his frightened, crying wife to tell him what happened, but she just waved her hand dolefully. "It seems, Benjamin, we lost today the most precious thing in our lives, daughter, and it seems that this cannot be fixed. What have we done? How are we going to live without our little bead?" Everyone was just beside themselves. What could have happened? That they canceled the wedding right before the wedding. Mystery of the century. The guests were humming like a disintegrated beehive for a long time. They were speculating all sorts of things, but soon the disgruntled dispersed. At this time, Adriana was sitting in her best friend's kitchen. Kathy was drinking straight from the throat. Cognac sobbed and even tried to smoke, ridiculously, by flicking her lighter. Kathy was frightened, running around trying to comfort her friend in some way. "Adriana, come on. What are you doing? You don't smoke. You're already drunk. I get it. The wedding didn't happen. Yeah, it's a shame, I know. The groom turned out to be a brother. It's an extreme situation, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But look on the bright side. What's wrong with having such a great brother? But it's not Ethan's fault. What did you do? Did you tell him to get out of your life?" Adriana looked at her friend. "How can you not understand? I am so disgusted and disgusted. I mean, I love him to the point of shivers, to the point of goosebumps in real life. I thought I would marry him, have a baby with him, and we'll live like a family. And now what? How can I even look people in the eye? It's embarrassing. I can imagine how excited they'll be to talk about it. On every corner. Parents, how could they? Tell me why they didn't tell me that I wasn't theirs. I never want to see them again. Why am I so unlucky? It's like a curse. The first husband was a philanderer, and the second one was his own brother. It's unbelievable. Kathy hugged her best friend and started talking to her like a child. Things will change, but don't be so hot. Calm down. It's not your parents' fault. That's for sure. You thank them. I have to say, they adopted you and raised you. And not telling them anything, well, you know, it's not easy. How do you even tell a child you love that they're not your own? You go to bed now and don't rush into any decisions. You'll think it over again in the morning. Go back to sleep. That's it. I'm turning off the light. The next day, Adriana cooled down and looked at the situation differently. Despite a wild headache, she decided to go home, talk frankly with her parents, and find out who she was and where she came from. Taking a quick shower, Adriana asked her friend for a sweater and jeans, not wearing a wedding dress to go home, and tuned up for a difficult conversation on the way. She thought back over her childhood and couldn't remember a single moment when her parents had treated her differently. She would never say in her life that she was not her parents. When she was sick, they always took care of her. She stayed up all night taking her fever and taking her to the doctors. My father was always proud and praised her for every success. It just doesn't make sense in my head. When my mother saw Adriana on the doorstep, she tearfully rushed over to her and hugged and kissed her. She hastily chanted, "My daughter, you are back. How happy I am." And my father and I did not find ourselves. We didn't sleep all night. We couldn't think of anything. "Sit down. You're hungry. How about some soup? Or some tea? I baked some pancakes. They're still warm." Adriana quietly said no. "Mom, thank you. It's so bad. My head hurts after yesterday. I do not want to eat at all. I'd rather take a pill for the pain. Will you please tell me all the details about how you adopted me? And is it true what I read in the letter yesterday? I really need to know the truth. Whatever it is, my head is a mess. I don't understand anything yet, but I promise not to be rude or throw any more tantrums." Betty sat down next to her, took her daughter by the hand, and began to tell her story. "As it happens, my husband and I were never able to be parents. I have health problems. Doctors throw up their hands and strictly forbade me to get pregnant and give birth. My eyesight has been very bad since childhood. Do you know how many operations I had? All the doctors said that if I decided to get pregnant, I could die. And I suffered so much, I looked at how. Mothers taking their babies to kindergarten. My heart bleeds. I'm with the kids all the time washing their clothes, and at night I'm crying into my pillow. I want to have a baby of my own. So we decided to take a child from the orphanage. We went there to see how many children were there. They were running and playing and screaming almost like a kindergarten. Only the eyes of all of them were not at all like those of home children. There was no naivety in them. Happiness only, a wild sadness and doom. And only one was sitting quietly and sadly on the windowsill, tucked under her funny feet in old sandals, and looked out the window, thinking about something. You were such a doll. I immediately fell into my heart. And blue eyes, like the sky, and so sad. You probably do not remember how we met. She held me in her arms and hugged me. From that moment on, I knew for sure that I had found my daughter. I didn't even look at anyone else. Christina, the nurse, told me that you were brought to the orphanage by your own mother. You were just an infant in diapers. She had a son about 2 years old with her. She said her husband died tragically, and now she had 2 children left in her arms, so she decided to give you up. Thought she couldn't handle 2. Maybe she was really desperate for money, or maybe she decided to make life easier. Who knows? She didn't give me her name. She didn't give me her papers. She turned and left. Christina gave you her own name. She loved you so much, got attached to you. She wanted to adopt you too. She had a tragedy herself at the time. Her baby died in childbirth, and after that she was forbidden to have any more babies. But her husband was adamantly against adoption. He took a stand for a divorce or someone else's child. Well, the educator was already of an age, and she didn't risk divorce. She couldn't stay in her old age either. That's why Christina took care of you all the 3 years you were in the orphanage and said goodbye to you very hard. When your father and I took you away, she asked us to love and take care of you very much. We lived, of course, very modestly, but Daddy and I tried to make sure you didn't need anything. Please don't be offended with us for not telling you anything. I guess it was really wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to say it, and I didn't know how to say it. But wouldn't you be glad to know that you're the dearest person in the world to me personally? Daddy and I live for you. Dad, he was so worried yesterday. His blood pressure spiked to 200. We even had to call an ambulance. What about if Ethan really is your brother? It's hard to say. According to the paperwork, he is. I mean, they're official. Besides, he's about 2 years older than you are. And the educator said that the woman who brought you was with a 2-year-old boy. It's quite possible that she gave him up to the orphanage too. Only in another city. Things happen. I can imagine how much it hurts because you love Ethan so much. I can see that. I don't know how I can help you, but just know that your dad and I love you and will always be there for you, no matter what happens. Adriana took her mother in her arms, stroked her, and whispered, sobbing, "Forgive me, Mommy. I'm sorry for being so rude to you yesterday. It's not your fault, and I will never stop loving you and Daddy. If it weren't for you, I might never have known the warmth of home and the love of my parents. But I still want to find out who the anonymous person is who sent this letter. Will you help me? Maybe I can find my mother too. I want to look at her and ask her why she did what she did." Betty and Benjamin looked at each other, and Father said, "My mother and I were thinking about it all night last night. We thought maybe Christina was the teacher. It's not like there's anyone else to do it. She loved you very much. Maybe she was watching you from afar. Who knows? We should go to the orphanage and ask around. If she still works there, of course." Adriana perked up. "Then let's go right after my shift the day after tomorrow. I really want to unravel all this and find out the truth, since we could not get married." Betty cautiously asked my daughter, "Why do you communicate with Ethan? Do you categorically not want to? He called us, worried that you cut off all contact, even if it is true. And he's your brother. Is that a bad thing? He's suffering too, and it's not his fault. Maybe you should change your anger for mercy." Adriana cried again. There is still a very bleeding soul wound, and replied, "I can't see him. Mommy, I love him, even if it kills me, but how will I be with him as a brother? If we are in love, it is better not to communicate at all then. Everything inside me revolts. I love him as a man, but not as a brother, and I don't think I can live with that. And I miss him terribly too. Mom, I feel so bad. If you only knew how much it hurts inside." Betty stroked her daughter on the head like a little girl and softly whispered, "Cry, cry, with tears of grief. It's coming out, they say. Maybe she'll feel a little better." As arranged, Adriana and her parents went to the orphanage where they adopted her and talked to the director. But it turned out that Christina had died several years ago from a serious illness. That's how the whole investigation came to a standstill. Who, and most importantly, why decided in such a way to disrupt the wedding of the young and warn about the kinship with her husband? It remained a mystery. A couple more weeks passed. Adriana, like a robot, went to work and automatically went home to eat and even sometimes to sleep. But just no more joking or smiling. Everything inside her, as if petrified. And only at night her soul was desperately torn to him, to her beloved, to the one whom she could not even dare to call brother, because everything inside trembled at the mere thought of him. One day her shift was coming to an end when the phone rang. An unknown number popped up on the display. Adriana grabbed the phone, thinking to herself, what if it was from the shelter? Maybe some news. I left my number with the manager. On the other end of the line, she heard Ethan's voice, so familiar and painful. Adriana, please don't hang up. There was no way I could reach you. Look, let's do a genetic test. I'm sure we're not related, but you have nothing to lose after all. Why do we blindly believe these papers and not double-check them? Why torture ourselves? Suffering. Maybe some sick person sent it on purpose to split us up. The woman sadly said, I do not mind. Let's do it. Although I am sure it will not change anything. All signatures on the documents are authentic, so there can be no mistake. So I don't see the point in the expertise, but if you want me to, I'll take it. That same day, Ethan and Adriana turned in the material and agreed that they would come here together exactly 3 days later to get the results. They tried not to make this unbearable pain was evident in their eyes. They were drawn to each other like a magnet. It was like an obsession. The 3 days dragged on like a year for Adriana. Time seemed to stop and stand still. The hands of the clock did not move at all. The woman knew that there was no chance that they were not related, especially after what her parents had told her. But still, deep down inside, there was hope. What if they were not relatives? They arrived at the lab 5 minutes early at the appointed time. The lab assistant handed over the envelope with the results. Ethan, with trembling hands, opened it and read on the sheet the conclusion of the DNA examination. Ethan and Adriana, kinship 0%. He read it 3 times, loudly, almost syllable by syllable. He reread what was written in the document. And just in case, he asked the doctor again, she and I are not related. That's what it said right there. The lab assistant sadly replied yes. Unfortunately, you are not blood relatives of the man. Ran up to the dazed medic and kissed her on the cheek. Then picked up Adriana in his arms and began to twirl and scream like crazy. Correct. Not unfortunately, but fortunately, I knew. I believed. I felt, well, there could be no such crazy love for my sister. Adriana just sobbed with happiness, not able to believe what I heard, and still perplexed. What about the letter? And all these documents? Well, they do not look like a fake. I don't understand it. Who wanted all this? It's like a puzzle. Ethan took her by the arms. I'm going down to the orphanage tonight, and I'm going to find out. There must be some explanation. Wait for the news. I love you more than life itself. You hear me? We're gonna be fine. I gotta go. Adriana came home and told her parents everything. Everyone was very happy. Mom even cried. Well, thank God, my daughter. This is the best news I've heard in a long time. But still, who and why sent the horrible, untrue, anonymous letter and wanted to destroy your love with Ethan? I don't get it. It's been a week from Ethan. There has been no news. The connection has been jamming too. The woman was nervous and practically did not let the phone out of her hands. Finally, the cherished call sounded, and the loved one on the other end of the line literally shouted, Adriana, urgently take a vacation and come to me. Here is such news. You just stunned when you know all. The connection is bad. I'll wait for you at the train station tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Dazed, the woman was burning with curiosity and excitement. She ran without talking to get ready for her journey. She was shaking all over. Who was it? Why? Had he sent a letter? Maybe Ethan had found out something about his kin. I'm going crazy until tomorrow. The next day, Ethan was waiting on the platform with flowers for his beloved. They hugged, kissed, and hurried to his house. On the way home, he did not stop talking. He could not wait to get home. Can you imagine? I found this out. I went to the principal and showed her the letter and our expertise. She went back through all the archives. We dug around there for days and found all the originals. You do have an older brother, but it wasn't just me. Both he and I were put into an orphanage on the same day and hour. Not only that, his name is Ethan too, and our birthdays are the same. So there was a mix-up. When they asked for your brother's records, they gave them my file instead of your brother's. And of course, it said he had a sibling. But that's not all. The supervisor told me that this wasn't the first time I had been wanted by some rich pensioners. My biological grandparents. They left their coordinates in case the manager found me before. So I contacted them and met with them. There's a story there, just like in a detective story. I still can't believe what I found out about myself. It turns out that my parents were childless millionaires, and in order to conceive a child, they used a surrogate mother to avoid publicity and unnecessary noise. The situation was concealed, and the surrogacy was done unofficially for a lot of money. The woman became pregnant. From the first session, everything went well. So a week before the delivery, the parents tragically died, and the surrogate mother went into premature labor due to nervousness, and she died right in the delivery room from hemorrhage. I ended up in an orphanage, of course. My grandparents John and Evelyn were living in Switzerland at the time and didn't know anything about it. It was after my daughter died. Some years later, they found her diary and her personal belongings, and only from there they learned about surrogacy and her grandson. For many years, they made inquiries to various maternity homes and orphanages. They believed that maybe I was alive, and they were looking for me. And finally, we found each other. They did a genetic test. Everything was confirmed. I am their grandson and a rich heir, even though I was born of a surrogate mother. They have their own metal recycling company, and more than one. They wanted to take me in, but I categorically refused. Unless it's with you, I don't need anything without you. That's when he offered me the position of head of their branch in the capital. Of course, first I would have to undergo training to gain experience. There's not much time, but I think you can manage with me. We'll finally get married and move. By the way, they have an apartment in the capital, and they're giving it to me. That's the way it is. That's fantastic. Adriana was really shocked. She said, "Wow, how lucky you are. Growing up an orphan, suddenly you're the grandson of millionaires. What about the letter? You never said anything. Who sent it? Who do you think sent it?" The headmistress didn't say anything. Ethan looked at her intriguingly. It turns out that some strange old woman with a scar on her neck was asking for information about me and your brother a few months ago. And the employee of the archives mistook me for him and gave her the wrong information. That left her phone number. I decided that you should call it yourself. What if it's your mother or some relative? This is the woman's number. Without a moment's hesitation, Adriana dialed the same number. Her heart felt like it was pounding in her throat. On the other end, at last, someone said sleepily, "Hello, I'm listening." Adriana took a breath of air and said firmly, "Hello, my name is Adriana. I'm 28 years old. I was raised for 3 years in an orphanage. Then I was adopted. You asked for information about me and my brother. You are my mother. We need to meet and talk about everything. Please, I'm begging you, don't hang up." There was a pause. Then a dry voice for 3 minutes said I was very sick. "Come to Matrosov Street, 9. I'm always at home." This is not a telephone conversation, and the interlocutor hung up. Adriana immediately threw the suitcase out of the way and Ethan's room rushed with him to the specified address. She was all shaking with nerves. Is it really her? Found my own mother. How to behave, what to say. After all, in fact, we are complete strangers, though the relatives. They rang the doorbell for a long time. At last they heard footsteps. A very weak and haggard woman with sunken cheeks, huge black circles under her eyes opened the door. Her face showed traces of its former beauty. The facial features were pleasant, and in spite of that, it was unmistakable now, when looking at her, who Adriana was like. The same curls and dimples on her cheeks and blue eyes. The woman invited them in, led them into the kitchen, put the kettle on. The furnishings in the apartment were more than modest. It was obvious that no one had cleaned the place properly in a long time. All the shelves and cabinets were covered with a thick layer of dust. And I am very ashamed that I put you and your brother in an orphanage. I'm a bad girl. Here's how it was. My husband was a great guy, a trucker who made good money. So we bought this apartment. We lived well. And then, when your brother Ethan was 2 years old, I got pregnant with you. To be honest, we weren't planning on having a second child so early. Well, it just sort of happened. It was kind of scary. But my husband reassured me, saying, "Don't worry, I'll make money for everybody." He loved me very much, thought I was the most beautiful. Such as William in my life, have never met a man. I was days away from giving birth, when William tragically crashed, falling asleep to death from fatigue at the wheel, failing to control the car. I screamed like crazy with grief and shock. I went straight to the maternity hospital. And that same night I gave birth to you, Adriana. At first I took you home, but then I got so terribly depressed. Grief and hopelessness came over me. I didn't want to live at all. You're crying. I'm nervous. The milk is gone. Your brother's not much bigger. He needs attention all day long too. All the money went to the funeral and the wake. There was no one to help. My parents had died by then. My husband was being brought up by my grandmother alone. So I broke down. I couldn't stand it and took you to the orphanage myself. I thought I was doing the right thing, that you'd be better off there than starving to death with me. Then I met Liam, a well-to-do man, and started living with him. At least he worked and gave me and my son money for food and clothes. But 6 months passed and my roommate gave me an ultimatum. I give Ethan to the shelter or he leaves. He didn't like him at all. He couldn't stand him. Called him a stranger's brat with an extra mouth. And when he drank, what a mess. He demanded to have a baby for him. So I chickened out again. I let my guard down. And now I gave my son to the orphanage. I justified myself, somehow lulled my conscience. I know what I did was despicable. I should have chased that Liam away and lived with my son and looked for work. But I never had any more children. Liam left me 5 years later anyway, so I lived my whole life alone. I had other men in my life. At one time, I even started drinking heavily and wanted to lay hands on myself. But the chandelier couldn't stand it and fell on top of me. The shards of glass stuck so deeply that scars remained for the rest of my life. Then I was treated in a psychiatric clinic for a long time. But no matter what I did in my soul, I had no peace all these years. I was terribly tormented by my conscience. It was eating me up inside. It came to me much later. What had I done? That there were no people on earth closer and more dear to me than my children. And no roommate or man can compare. And 6 months ago, apparently, there was payback for my terrible sins. I got cancer, and there was no point in treating me. It's too late, and there's nothing to do. So I decided to try to find you and my brother. Yes, to ask for forgiveness and repent before I die. I found out all about you first, Adriana, and that you were getting married, and that your husband was Ethan, and that your birthday was the same, and that you were brought up in the orphanage where I took your brother many years ago. It just made me feel cold inside. I decided to double-check and put in a request to the orphanage. And when I got that very letter, I felt sick. I wondered what was going on. My own sister and brother are getting married. That's mixing and the children will be born ugly. So I decided to stop it. I never dared to come and tell it to my face all my life. I have a cowardly nature. So I delivered the letter by courier on the day of the wedding. Adriana clutched her head. She felt sick to her stomach at what she heard. God, you almost ruined my life. And if Ethan hadn't insisted on a genetic test, 2 loving hearts would have been broken forever. We believed that letter, even though it wasn't really your fault. There was a mix-up. I don't know if you can make a soap opera. It's a mess. So where's my real brother? Ethan, did you find out? I want to meet him, communicate with him. The woman nodded her head. Yes, he even lives in my neighborhood. It turns out, he's getting married too. Works as a driver, like his father. Only he didn't want to see me. He said it was too late to repent. Can't get anything back. Yeah, I know all that myself. I'm glad he's doing well. I'll write you his address now. That's right. You decided, daughter, that you and your brother should communicate with each other. I don't expect forgiveness. I understand that such a sin is unforgivable. My only regret is that I realized it late. But now, I'm not afraid to die. Thank you for visiting the old fool. And once again, I apologize for everything. Adriana was shocked. She cried and simultaneously hated and pitied her mother, who had so thoughtlessly and foolishly used her life. Even more, she respected her adoptive father and mother, who were not afraid to take the little man into their family and bring him up with dignity, even though they did not live well. Such different souls. Just amazing. Adriana was silent for a long time, looking at her mother, and then she squeezed out through her tears. It's hard for me to talk about it and understand what you did. But thanks to my foster parents, I grew up in a normal, intelligent family, and I knew no grief and deprivation. My parents loved me very much. I am madly grateful to them for that. But in any way, you gave me life. I wouldn't even be on this earth if it weren't for you. I am not God or a judge, and I have no right to judge anyone. So, no matter what, I forgive you, Mom. I will help you and visit you. Who knows, maybe you really couldn't have done otherwise. The old woman sobbed and hugged her daughter. Thank you, sweetheart, for your kind heart. Come back often. I will be happy. And again, forgive me for everything. When they went outside, Adriana staggered, breathing in the fresh air. She cried and laughed inappropriately, trying to understand everything that had happened to her. Everything was mixed up in her soul. Hatred, anger, joy that her own mother had asked for forgiveness. She was still alive. Gratitude for her adoptive mother. Ethan understood everything because he himself, when he found out about his relatives, had the same feelings. So he just hugged his beloved tightly, whispering, that's it, cry. Do you need it so much now? I understand that your mind is in complete chaos right now. You need time to settle down. Let's go to my place for lunch. I've been waiting for you to bake chicken and potatoes, and then we'll slowly put everything in its place and discuss it. Come on, my good man, let's go. Adriana kissed Ethan and whispered thankfully, thank you for having you. It's amazing how accurately you described everything. You can understand me with half a glance. It's really not easy for me right now. But when you're around, it doesn't seem so scary anymore. It's great that we're not related and we can love each other and be together for the rest of our lives. I suffered so much when we broke up. I didn't want to live. I couldn't even breathe. Ethan laughed and continued, and I thought I was relieved. I was like a tree uprooted from your life and kicked out. But somehow I was 100% sure we weren't brother and sister. How could there be such an ocean of love for a sister? The next day, Adriana met her own brother. They were remarkably similar in appearance and without any genetic testing. The same curls and blue eyes only. The brother's nose was different, hunched and long. The close people hugged and kissed each other. They were very happy to see each other. But what struck Adriana the most? It turned out that Ethan knew him, for they had been brought up in the same orphanage at the same time. The two men recognized each other and hugged each other like old friends. Surely God works in mysterious ways. Her brother led Adriana and her fiancé into the kitchen. There his fiancée, Lisa, was already busy setting the table. She was so small and pretty, just like Thumbelina, and so friendly and sociable. You could tell she was a good person. They ate lunch, then went into the living room. Ethan talked about his life. After graduation, Adriana's brother got a room in a communal apartment. He went to driving school, got his license. Since childhood, he had been fascinated by travel and adventure. Monotonous work was definitely not for him. 6 months ago, he met a nice girl, Lisa. He gave her a ride home late at night. They became friends at first, and then fell in love. They were also supposed to get married in a month. When he found out that his sister had lost her wedding because of his mother and her interference, he became furious. What kind of person gives us away as puppies, did not bring up, not interested in our lives at all, and then suddenly decided to help, in a way that almost ruined your life? I don't want to have anything to do with her. I remember very well how I cried, grabbed her by the hem of her dress. When she gave me away, I was literally pulled down by force. There is a feeling of betrayal through my whole life. I kept believing and waiting for Mommy to come back and take me away. I can't forgive her. Adriana hugged her brother. Look, I understand. It hasn't been easy for you, and neither has my fiancé. And you're absolutely right that our birth mother acted wildly and inhumanly. But Ethan is not for us to judge her. The good thing is, at least at the end of her life, she's realized it now. And it's not good enough. Cancer is a terrible thing. No matter how you look at it, we are her own children, and we have to take care of her. Well, it's not like it's going to kill us. If we come once a week and sit with her for an hour or two, we have to be human. First of all, I'll visit her personally. I think you'll reconsider your attitude too. Ethan muttered, I don't know. We'll see. Hey guys, why don't we just have a wedding on the same day? What do you think of that? That's so cool and symbolic. Lisa and Adriana got excited and clapped their hands. We were all for it. That's a great idea, and we'll be sure to invite our new relatives, my mom, your grandparents. Let them be happy for their grandchildren. That's what we decided. We carefully prepared everything. And a month later, the double wedding finally took place. Wealthy Ethan relatives flew in from overseas just in time for the occasion. John and Evelyn, despite their very advanced age, looked stylish and stunning. They joked and chatted a lot. At the festive table, the grandparents gave the newlyweds regal gifts. Evelyn took the microphone and informed her guests and friends. Until a month ago, my husband and I were living out our lives alone. We had no hope of ever finding our grandson. But God was merciful. He heard our prayers. And now we have finally met. Ethan is our only heir, so all our assets, accounts, and real estate will go to him when we die. In the meantime, we want to make gifts to our newlyweds. Since we invited Ethan to work in our branch in the capital, we give him and his wife this 3-room apartment. And to make it easy to get there, here are the keys to the car. This powerful Mustang will take you anywhere, anytime. But we want the young couple to spend their honeymoon with us in Switzerland. We have something to surprise them and show them. And now let's drink to the young couple. The audience applauded for a long time and shocked. The newlyweds rushed in to kiss and thank such generous relatives. They still couldn't believe what they were hearing. Emily, Adriana's own mother, was also among the guests, though she wasn't feeling very well. She was sick all the time and had no appetite, but she couldn't miss her own children's wedding. Adoptive mother Betty was habitually fussing around Adriana, fixing her dress, fixing her brooch. The woman was happy, too, that things were finally going well for her daughter. She knew and understood how important it was to live her life with the man you really love, to warm her heart with his warmth. Though Betty and Benjamin had never lived luxuriously, rather the opposite, still, she would never trade her husband for anyone else, even if she had rewound it years ago. She and her husband were like a thread and a needle together for over 50 years, and not once has she regretted her decision. And Ethan truly loves her daughter. She knew it right away. He has cherished her so much. In the midst of Emily's merriment, and Adriana's birth mother struggled to get up from the table and walked over to Betty's adoptive parents, Benjamin, and sincerely thanked them for her daughter. I'm probably going home now. I don't feel well at all. But first I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for adopting Adriana and giving her love and affection. Raised such a wonderful person. And I, to my shame, chickened out and betrayed my children. I was afraid I couldn't handle it. Thank you very much. Betty felt sorry for this sick and miserable woman who had ruined her life with her own hands, depriving her of the greatest happiness of all, to be near her children. She told Emily that there was no going back. "I have no right to judge you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to raise and love our little girl. Let's be happy with what we have now. Your children have grown up to be good people. Now you can communicate with them. That's happiness too. Look how happy they are. Their eyes are burning with love. Today is such a day. Two families formed at once, so let's have some fun. Let's raise our glasses to the newlyweds. Two mothers, native and adopted. They drank to the happiness and health of the newlyweds, wishing them happiness and a long married life. The honeymoon was a success. Adriana paid off her job. They were going to move soon anyway. And they went on a trip with their son, Evelyn. What can I say for her and Ethan, who have never been to the sea? It was a trip they would remember for the rest of their lives. They didn't sit still for a second. They looked at museums, admired the beauty. They walked around, ate delicious, moldy cheese and chocolate. We talked a lot. Grandparents told what Ethan's parents were like. They showed a lot of pictures. It was so interesting, like looking into your own past life. To finally see what you looked like and whose character you carry. After all, it's so important to know who you are and where you come from. What is your place in your family? Who are your ancestors? The power of lineage gives protection from health and protects you from misfortune. To be without lineage, without tribe, what could be scarier? The old men were so happy that they got a grandson and a daughter-in-law at once, and everyone begged them not to delay with their great-grandchildren. John slyly winked at Evelyn and said, "Do you think, dear, that we will live to see our great-grandchildren?" The old woman laughed like a schoolgirl. "And where will we go? Honey, look, don't you dare leave your faithful spouse alone on this earth. Remember what you promised me in the marriage salon years ago." Adriana and Ethan marveled. How did they manage to look so good at that age and still be joking and invariably together? She even said, "Dear Evelyn, you are an example to us now. In all things, you might say, the standard of married life. We admire and are proud of you, and we will try to live together in the same way, happily ever after." Upon our return, Adriana visited her mother, as she promised. She brought her many gifts, helped her clean the house, and talked about her experiences. Then they drank tea with Swiss chocolate. The old woman put a warm shawl on her shoulders, presented by her daughter. Inhaling the fragrance of expensive floral perfume and smiling blissfully, she even stopped hurting inside for a while. It was a moment of absolute happiness. Even if it was late, even if it wasn't long, and there was nothing to be gained back. But now, at that very moment, she felt that her daughter really loved her and forgave her. Adriana later called her brother and gently asked Ethan, "You never went to your mother." "I went to see her yesterday. She's really very bad. I think her days are numbered." "Well, be kinder. Get over your resentment. Make peace with her even before she dies. It's very important to her, and to you too. You just don't understand it yet. You're going to have children soon, aren't you? Who knows, maybe you'll be wrong too. And God forbid they don't forgive you." The man pondered his sister's words all night long and decided to follow her advice. He bought a bag of food, knew that his mother lived hard for tea, and went to her house. He hesitated to the last moment. He stood at the door for a long time. The damned resentment choked and burned as if he were 2 years old again, instead of 30. Finally, he got over himself. He rang the doorbell. No one answered for a long time. Then he heard footsteps down the hall. The lady opened the door and gasped. On the threshold stood her son. She spoke hastily. "Son, you came after all. Thank you. You pleased the old woman. Come in, get undressed. I'll put the kettle on." She hurried down the corridor and suddenly staggered and almost flew to the floor. The frightened son picked up the weightless woman and carried her to a chair. At that moment he again felt the very embrace of his mother. Like when he was a child then. How he had missed them. How he had missed them. The old woman was crying, clinging to him harder and harder. And he whispered to her too, not holding back sobs. "Don't cry. Mommy, I'm not angry anymore. I still love you. Sit down. I'll do it myself." Emily kept holding his hand and repeating, "And I love you. If you knew, sweetheart, how many millions of times in my life I've regretted what I've done. How ashamed have I been. I tried to kill myself, but it didn't work. I drank, but it didn't work either. Forgive me, darling, if you can. Here, I'll show you something." She got up and pulled out a string hat from the closet, and 2 pink shirts, and a soft bunny with button eyes. "That's what I've kept all my life. These are your strings and your hat and your daughter's shirts. And this is your bunny. You slept with him all the time. I often go through these things in tears as a memory of you. I'm a bad mother. There is no forgiveness for me." All the hatred and anger toward my mother had gone away. Ethan felt so sorry for her. So she wasn't callous or insensitive, as he'd thought all these years. She just chickened out, broke down. There was no one there after her father's death to help support her, to lend a helping hand. She had punished herself. It was the worst thing in the world. He smiled cheerfully and said everything. "Mommy, stop apologizing and let's forget everything. Here he is. I'm your son. And here you are my mother. And that's the main thing. Let's go to tea with a cake. I'll tell you what my Lisa came up with." They talked for a long time. Then Ethan took the woman for a walk in the yard. They talked warmly. He promised to come back one of these days. Emily fell asleep that night with a feeling of absolute happiness. Even the nasty sickness seemed to have receded. She felt so well and at peace with herself for the first time in years. She mentally thanked the Almighty that He had mercy on her and gave her this unexpected meeting with her children, that He protected them from harm, and that they found the strength to forgive her good for nothing. Adriana had not forgotten. I brought them gifts and souvenirs. He and my mom hugged, kissed, laughed. And on the way, Benjamin winked. "Well, my daughter, how long do we have to wait for our mother and grandchildren? We could have babysat by now." Adriana caught herself thinking that no matter how she turned out, these people were the closest, even if not by blood, but by heart. After all, they had raised her, put their soul into her year after year. She remembered how Daddy had blown on her wound, treated her, her knees knocked out on the bicycle, how she and her mother had baked her first cake, and she had managed to knock over a bag of flour on herself. Everyone laughed, cleaned up amicably, and no one even thought to scold her. How her father worried, mildly reprimanded her when she was late and came in late from her appointments. It is from these moments in life that mutual love, warmth, home is formed. That place where you are always loved and welcome, ready to listen, understand, and forgive, no matter what you have done. In a burst of emotion, Adriana suddenly jumped up to kiss her father on the cheek, hugged Mommy, and whispered how much I love him. "You have no idea. You will have grandchildren, I promise." Grandpa and Grandma Ethan also asked for that very much, dreaming of nurturing great-grandchildren soon.